Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm looking at yet another brand new model from EFE Rail. I have no idea just how many EFE Rail / Kerno models I've reviewed this year, but it feels like an awful lot, doesn't it? They truly have become a very prolific manufacturer. It's been a great year for them, and plus a lot of this stuff is brand new. They're not just recycling older models anymore, they're actually investing in brand new products, which is really good to see. I've enjoyed it this year, and I think they've really contributed a lot to the industry this year. Anyway, there is time in this year for just one more new Kerno product. I say that, I'm sure next week they'll probably release something else, but as far as I know, this is going to be it for the year. Famous last words. And today I am reviewing this. It is the 12-ton Plasser general purpose crane. And there's 3 different versions of this crane available at the moment. 2 of them are in the departmental yellow, and 1 of them is in the Javis or Fastline maroon livery, and that's what I went for. The full RRP for these is £89.95, so the best part of 90 quid, and at the retailers where they're discounted, you can generally pick these up for about £76.45. So not dirt cheap or anything, but from the photos they do look like pretty complex models, so looking forward to seeing what these are like. Now in real life these cranes were actually self-propelled, so they could drive themselves along without a locomotive, and they could even do a bit of shunting as well. Unfortunately, these models are not self-propelled, they are just like a piece of rolling stock, you haul them along. And I'm a little bit torn on how I feel about that. Obviously, I do appreciate the relatively low price of this crane, and if this was effectively a locomotive, if it was driven, it would cost a lot more than 75 quid or so. On the other hand though, I feel like it would be a lot cooler and a lot more useful on people's layouts if it was self-propelled. Part of me really wishes I could use this as a shunter, but you can't, it's just a piece of rolling stock, static as far as I know, and I guess the price reflects that, but do keep that in mind. Speaking of the price, yeah, I do think this is actually fairly reasonable, because back in 2018, Hatton's actually announced this exact model, and back in 2018, the price for this was going to be £69. Now, sadly, the Hatton's model was cancelled, it never came to fruition, but taking that price of £69 and adjusting for inflation, this £76.45 at the retailers works out at around £11 cheaper than the Hatton's one would have cost. Yeah, at £69, the Hatton's model would just be a couple of pounds less than the full RRP of this thing today. So yeah, I think for a new 2024 model, the price of this seems reasonable. But is it any good? Are the features there? Is the quality there? That's what I want to find out today. So join me for this review. I hope you enjoy it. And if you'd like to try one of these for yourself, I will pop affiliate links in the description. Okay, EFE Rail / Kerno's brand new 12-ton Plasser crane. So this crane in real life was introduced in the late 1970s, which makes this far more modern than basically I think all of the other cranes that I've reviewed before on this channel. Most of those have been steam cranes, this one is not. So I think it's really good that we've now got a crane that people modelling anything after the steam era can take advantage of. Now, one thing that often crops up when I review these EFE Rail models is I mention Kerno and such, and I always get the odd comment or message saying it's not Kerno, it's Bachmann. Seems to be some confusion, so just to clear it up once and for all for this model, let me show you the back of the box. You can see this is distributed on behalf of Kerno Model Rail Centre by Bachmann Europe PLC. So Kerno make the models, Bachmann distribute them. Right, so let's talk about this model then. First of all, let me show you the end of the box. So this is E87049. It is the Plasser 12-ton YOB crane in the Javis / Fastline red / maroon livery. No particular reason for me choosing this one other than that I just thought it looked really fancy. So let's open this up and see exactly what you got. I've not read up too much on the sort of features of this model, so most of this will be a bit of a surprise for me. No instructions though, so hopefully this will be quite straightforward. And I can see that we've got some accessories here. So we've got screw link couplings which are in the raised position, and they seem to be fixed that way, so they're not proper movable couplings, but nice that we've got them. And then we've got some beautifully painted pipework which you can fit on the buffer beams if you want to. So nice simple accessories bag. You can use that if you want to add that little bit extra detail. In fact, I'll put those to one side. Right, first look at the crane then. Not seen even a sample of these in the flesh before, so this should be pretty interesting. Here we go. Let's see what this is like. You can see through the sort of plastic wrap already what a detailed model this is. All right. It's well wrapped up. Let's see if I can get this off. Gosh, wow. Yeah, I mean, for 75 quid, this is a very, very complex model. It looks complex in its detailing and also extremely complex in its paintwork. Right, any weight to this thing? Oh, wow. Yes, right, I'm sold. End of review. Thank you very much for watching. Excellent value, excellent quality. Very, very heavy. And it does seem to be made mostly of plastic. I'm not feeling any metal. Even the sort of sole bar or the chassis, that's plastic as far as I can tell. But there's a great bit of weight to this. It's really, really hefty. And just look at all the detail on this. Gosh, countless separately fitted parts. So, yeah, it's a little bit hard to tell from the photos whether this model's kind of worth all that money. Seems like quite a lot for a non-motorized piece of rolling stock. Yeah, now that I've got it in my hands, I would say it's clear that quite a bit of money has been spent on this because there is a lot of complexity here. So anyway, I'll take a much closer look at this in just a second and we'll talk about its details, features and also the quality of the thing. But first of all, let's have a bit of background on these cranes in real life. The Plasser 12-ton general purpose cranes were introduced in the mid-1970s as a replacement for the aging diesel or even steam cranes that went before them. While these older cranes were perfectly fit for purpose, the new Plasser design boasted a large number of improvements. It was self-driven like the older ones were, but with these the drive could be disengaged to allow them to be hauled at a faster rate as part of a train. The Plasser design also had a telescopic jib, making it extremely compact, and I think you can clearly see just how much smaller this is than some of the older and larger crane designs. As the jib swung outwards, there was also no tail swing, which allowed operations on adjacent tracks to continue as normal. Older cranes would swing out at the back, meaning that adjacent train lines would have to be taken out of service while the crane was in operation. The cranes were mainly used for track laying or relaying, and they could even be used for light shunting as a result of being self-propelled, which is just fascinating. They were used heavily until the mid-2000s, and although today they're not used as often as they used to be, there's still a number of them in use privately. So there it is, up close and personal for you, Kerno's brand new 12-ton Plasser general purpose crane. And as you can clearly see, this is a very detailed and very complex model, yet it's still available at a pretty reasonable price, which is great. But it's also clear that quite a lot of compromises have been made in order to achieve that. Now, I'm not saying that this is a massive problem, but it might be to you as a modeler depending on what you want to do with this thing. I think at the very least they are worth talking about. So, as I've already briefly mentioned, this model is not motorized. So unlike the real thing, you can't drive this around by itself on your layout. And I understand why they've done that. I think to motorize these bogies would probably have compromised their accuracy, and I certainly like the affordable price of this. But on the other hand, I think it's a real shame that you can't use this thing on your model railway as you could in real life. I do think that is a real missed opportunity. But I think an even more serious omission is the fact that the jib is not at all posable. So you can't telescopically extend the jib. All of these parts are fixed, and the sort of turret or the main crane cannot be swung outwards. It is fixed absolutely in this position as far as I can tell. Which again, I think is a pity when you think about some of the other cranes that I've looked at. I mean, that Bachmann Southern crane with all its moving gears and fully working mechanisms was absolutely astonishing compared with this, which is entirely fixed in place. Now again, this kind of makes sense. This is a complex thing to make movable, and maybe if this whole thing was able to rotate, then it would be less realistic. And you might say, well, it's not a toy, why does it need action features like that? Well, the thing is, railway modelers like to pose vehicles like this in realistic scenarios. With this model, you can't do that. You can't have this in the middle of laying track on your diorama. All you can actually do with this is couple this into an engineering train and have it run along. I do think that is a serious limitation. I personally am fine with that, you know, all I'm going to do is run this along, but if you wanted to pose this in a realistic position, I'm not sure how you would do that. You'd have to seriously modify the thing. Smaller compromises include the lighting. It is clear that this thing should have work lights, and it does, as you can see, but as far as I can tell, they are not working lights, they're just dummies. I don't think there's any electronics on board. Also, no sprung buffers. Again, that's not the end of the world, but if you're curious, yeah, this model doesn't have them. So it seems to be relatively reasonably priced, but it's also quite limited in what you can do with it, so worth bearing in mind. Like I say though, there is a lot to praise about this model, and the big one I suppose is the decoration, because this is very, very complex. The finish is quite matte, which I'm not that keen on. You know, this is a brand new metal crane. I think at the very least you'd expect more of a satin finish to this model, and I think that would improve the quality look of the model too. There's a lot of decorated effects on it though. Tons of wasp striping, which is done excellently. The buffer beams have wasp striping, as you can see. We've got a large area of wasp striping here at the rear of the crane, and we've got different sections painted into different colours. So this yellow section at the back, that's nice and crisp. We've got these boxes on the underframe, which are painted up slightly differently, a brighter red on here. And look at some of the printed effects on here. I think this is where a lot of the money has been spent. You can see the complexity of the print work here. Similarly, up above the sole bar, you can see we've got all of these warning signs for PPE there. Beautifully printed, and so many of these prints as well. Very, very high quality. I won't talk about them all, but here are some of them. Yeah, it is definitely painted to modern standards, and it looks absolutely wonderful as a result. Detail-wise, it is only detailed when you look at it from the side or above like this. Underneath there is no realistic detail, so again, do bear that in mind. We've got very detailed bogies, crisp modern moulding, which looks fantastic. Metal wheels, of course, which are also lined. Here are the buffer beams that you can add more detail to if you want. The buffers, like I say, they're not sprung, but they are made of metal, which is good quality. And the couplings are kinematic, and they have a good smooth motion to them, so hopefully they will work well. Up above the buffer beams, we've got separately fitted lamp brackets. These are one of many, many separately fitted parts. We've also got the separate turning wheel here, as well as lots of other details across the sole bar. Some of these are just moulded on and painted, some of them are separately fitted. Around the other end, we've got, look at this little water can in there. That looks like a little separately fitted part. That is just an amazing detail. This is a very, very detailed crane. And then we've got the cab area of the crane, which is just stunning. We've got these handrails, which are very, very sturdy and separately fitted. I think they may be metal, or they could just be sort of well-fitted plastic ones. But yeah, they're very, very good. And we've even got glazed windows with painted window frames and an interior. Yeah, all of the panels inside here, the controls and such, they're all represented on the model, and many of them are painted as well. Wow, very, very impressive. And we've also got separately fitted wipers on the windows, this very interesting grille effect up on the roof window, which would afford the driver a view of the sort of crane when it was raised. These bars are a little bit thicker than in real life, but they are extremely well fitted. The crane itself has a large mixture of moulded and separately fitted parts. So this wiring here, this is just a part of the moulding and it's been painted. But then we've got loads of other separately fitted parts as well. We've got this sort of winding mechanism here, and the cables here, these are not sort of real flexible strings. They appear to be wire, but again, they're nice and sturdy as a result. All sorts of different separately fitted wires and cabling, and because these are not part of the moulding, they stand out really beautifully. And this telescopic section, obviously because it's fixed in place and it's not posable, at least it looks nice and realistic this way, and it can have all of these small detail parts fitted. Here is the hook, which is kind of nestled away out of sight, but it is there. And again, we've got the cable here, which is just sort of static wire. It's posed very nicely so that it looks like it's flexible, but it's not. This is all fixed in place. The area beneath the jib is very detailed as well. We've got this little gate, which is separately fitted. This handrail here is a little bit wobbly looking, and it's actually not attached at this end, so it doesn't sit too well. Not entirely sure why they had to settle for that. And then we've also got these grab irons too, which are quite flexible, but I suppose that means they're less likely to get broken off. Around the other side, the detailing is quite a bit different. We don't have the walkway here, but you can see where you could climb up this side, and there's handrails too. Little separately fitted barrel here, this looks great. We've got the exhaust, which is a separately fitted part, and loads of detail beneath the jib, including more sort of pipework and wiring, much of this separately fitted as well, so it's extremely complex. It is complex and it does have a lot of separately fitted parts, but they are all fitted extremely well. I cannot see a single piece of visible glue, and apart from this sort of wobbly handrail here, I can't see anything that's not fitted correctly. So all in all, I think this is a great quality model. It's certainly got a lot of details, but it is very light on features. Taking all of this into account though, I do think the asking price at the retailers at least is perfectly reasonable. £76.45 in this day and age for a model of this quality is perfectly acceptable, I think. The full price, £89.95, I think is somewhat less reasonable. I really wouldn't want to pay any more than the discounted retailer price for this. At closer to £90, I would want to see more features. I'd perhaps want to see some lights, and I'd at the very least want to be able to pose the jib. I think very luckily for Kerno, the discounted retailer price is just reasonable enough that I'm not having a complete meltdown about the quite noticeable lack of features. But yeah, overall, I think it's a good job, and while you can't use it as you would be able to use the real thing on your layout, as part of an engineering or works train, this will look very convincing indeed. That is, of course, provided it works properly. So with that, let's get this down onto the track, let's couple this up as part of a train, and let's see how it performs. So here is today's test setup. I've selected the Class 20 in a fairly modern Harry Needle livery for this test, and I've got a few other bits of rolling stock, but obviously the main feature is the Plasser crane. First, I'll talk a bit about weight. So it is very heavy, I would say, for a piece of rolling stock. It comes in at 137 grams, which is quite surprising because of how plasticky the model is, but there must be a lot of metal on the inside. That's about as heavy as your typical small shunter, so about the same as the Dapol Hawthorne Leslie, all made of metal, or about the same as the Helgen 165DE, to use a diesel example. So this is more than heavy enough. Obviously it's got quite a few wheels, 8 wheels. There'll be plenty of weight on each of those. In terms of the free rolling test, this did extremely well. Now there are no bearings on the axles, yet it still rolled right down to the bottom of Gordon's Hill, even making it beyond the curves. It is extremely free rolling, so despite the weight of it, it's still going to be very easy to haul. Anyway, what are the couplings like? Let's back up the Class 20. We've got the Oxford Pilchard wagon there coupling, and that's perfectly fine. That's a good coupling. Let's try and couple up to one of the Acura scale Warwells, X-Hattons. We've got that as well, so perfect couplings. Do they look like they're at the right height? Yep, perfectly. Okay, so let's send this over the points, just make sure everything's fine over those. Right, open up the points and let's back it all over. So we're only looking at the crane. If something else comes off, I'll take it off and just try it with the crane, but hopefully all will be fine. Yeah, crane's done it. Oh, I think everything's done it. Alright, so it seems pretty good. That looks very stable over the points. I didn't hear it making any noise at all. No sort of jumping or anything like that. It didn't even look close to derailing there. A bit faster forwards. Yeah, it's great. So those kinematics seem to be working well. Let's just check how it gets on around the track then. Hopefully they'll work just as well over the curves. There we go. I've backed it all the way up just to go forwards again. How pointless. Okay, continue. Alright, here we go. fourth radius to start with, and then we'll get on to the second. I think it's going to be fine though. Those kinematics seem to be good. Tempting fate there, but it paid off. Yeah, absolutely perfect. So if you want one of these to run as part of a train, I think I can say that it is perfectly fit for purpose, which is great. If you want one of these to do almost anything else with, I suppose besides parking it unused in a siding or something, you'll probably be disappointed because you can't pose it and it's not self-propelled. Now, yeah, I suppose you could do some surgery and pose this in a different position, but I think most modelers really won't want to tear this thing to pieces just to sort of pose it in a different position. It would be much more convenient if the crane was movable, but it's not, so bear that in mind. Yeah, pretty light on features there, no working lighting, no underframe detail, no sprung buffers, so there's definitely room for improvement on this. And I suppose the danger is that if another manufacturer is working on one of these behind the scenes for another bit of tasty product duplication, there's a lot of features another manufacturer could add that would improve on this crane, and at the right price, I think a competing Plasser 12-ton crane could be preferable. But this is reasonably priced, it is very well detailed, it looks excellent, so I think for what this is, it is perfectly acceptable, and there's certainly nothing wrong with the way this runs. So all in all, I'm relatively impressed by this, and I've said this before, but it is quite refreshing to see a bit of a simpler model available that maybe doesn't have every possible bell and whistle, but it is much more affordable than some of the truly top spec models. So it is nice to see something a little bit simpler. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the simplicity, and it is reflected in the price. I think you just need to keep in mind that this is not as all singing and all dancing as some models are. Let's have some ratings then for the EFE Rail Plasser crane. Level of detail, I've given 2-star. Now, I could tell immediately that I'm going to get some comments from people saying that this is unfair. Well, I promise you, I've thought about this. As far as I'm concerned, this is the right score. Now, the model is extremely detailed, it's got a lot of separately fitted parts, and it's very complex in its decoration. And I think this is why people are going to say 2 stars is a little bit harsh for this. But it's also missing a lot. The crane is not posable, it is fixed in that position. That takes away a lot of modelling opportunities. It's not self-propelled, so again that takes away any opportunities for shunting or moving it around by itself. It's got no underframe detail to it, it's got no working lights despite having lots of dummy lights, no sprung buffers, things like that. My issue is that there's lots of other models out there here in 2024 which do have these features. You've got the Lomac wagons, which are fully detailed right down on the underframe. You've got coaches that are cheaper than this that have fully working lighting. And then you've got cranes from the likes of Bachmann, which are fully posable and they have all the mechanisms built in. It wouldn't be fair on the other manufacturers who have invested in these features on their models if I gave this model that doesn't have them anything higher than 2-star. I think the simplicity is acceptable, but we have to recognise that this is not such a high-spec model as some of the other models out there. So I'm sticking with 2-star, I think that's fair. Performance though, 5-star, it is absolutely perfect. The couplings work great, it runs fine over points, it's extremely free rolling, and it's nice and heavy as well so that it's going to be stable at all times. An easy 5-star. Quality, I think I've been slightly generous here, but I have given it 5-star. I think this is fair though because I think I was suitably harsh on detail, so I am going to be a little generous here on quality. It is quite a plasticky model, but the weight is absolutely fine, so there's obviously some sort of die-cast blob somewhere inside the thing which brings the weight up. It's extremely well built, no visible glue, I didn't really see any paint that had gone astray, and there was only one slightly wonky part, which was that white handrail underneath the boom, which was not fixed down at one end, which I think was strange. I think ordinarily I might have knocked half a star off for that, but like I say, because I've been harsh elsewhere, I think I'm going to leave it at 5. It is a brilliantly high quality model. Value for money then, I think the full price of £89.95 is pushing it a little bit, given that this model is lacking quite a bit in features. However, the retailer price is much more reasonable at £76.45, and you know, it's a lot for a piece of rolling stock, but it's not just an open wagon or a simple coach. This has a lot of detail, it's got a fully painted cab, so many separately fitted parts. You know, it's not going to be available for 30 or 40 quid, is it? Unless it turns up in the sale in the future. But I think for a brand new release, the price here is fair, while not a bargain, so I've given it 4 star. Overall then, that is 7.27 out of 10, or a grade of D. Again, it seems a shame to have given this a D because it is a good model, it's certainly recommendable, but like I say, it's not particularly high spec, and the grade reflects that. I think you have to take this grade of D and take into consideration the context of the model railway scene in 2024. There are lots of high spec models out there. Those are the models that get A, Bs and Cs. I'm not saying this is a bad model for giving it a D, I'm just saying it's a little bit below those other models. Hopefully I've made that clear. I'm sure the comments will rain in regardless. Anyway, into the logbook it goes. It is above Dappol's vans and below Bachmann's Dinnerwick slate wagons. Can I recommend these? Yes, absolutely. Just make sure you know exactly what you're getting and what you're expecting before you make the purchase. So there you have it then folks, that will just about do it for yet another review, and this is yet another EFE/Kerno model which looks absolutely amazing, is very high quality and is reasonably affordable. You know, a couple of years ago I would never have dreamed that that was something we would start to see on a regular basis from EFE Rail, but we really are doing. These new tooled models are really excellent and they seem to be getting better and better in their level of detail. And because they're releasing so much, it just makes me wonder what else is in the pipeline. It seems impossible that there are no more models in the works, so I'm just really curious to know what those are and when we can expect them. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled on EFE Rail, keep your eyes peeled on Kerno. Cannot wait to see what they do next. But for this crane, that will just about do it. Enjoyed looking at this. It's a very, very highly detailed piece of rolling stock, but it's not a particularly effective crane, I think is what I would say. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Check out the affiliate links if you'd like to pick one of these up, and I'll catch you again very, very soon for another review. Alright, cheers folks, you take care.